Our scripture for this morning is from the book of Isaiah, chapter 43, verses 16 through 21. I'm about to do a new thing. Now it springs forth. Do you not perceive it? Sermon title is New Things. At some point or another, everyone wants, longs for, may have a deep and hidden desire for something new. What is that new thing? Perhaps it's a job or career change, a different home, better health, more education, spiritual growth, something transformative, something new. The day my mother, a widow of 7 children, 3 of whom were still living at home, quit her job, she was doing a new thing. Quit her job in a small Midwestern town where jobs were few and far behind and even fewer and farer away for people of color. She was sick and tired of being sick and tired, as the old adage says, and she took this power of fatigue and turned it into uncompromising dedication and courage, and with the help of the other children, began to transform her life and ours, doing a new thing, moving us into the promise of a future that she so wanted for us. For far too many, though, it's a rut. No new thing, just a rut, just one day the same as the next. No light at the end of the tunnel, just everything goes along as ordinary, and all we're doing is waiting to die, it seems. But God's promises do not allow for that to be the only thing. There's always this new thing.
Well,
millions and millions and millions. How many of people throughout history, if we track human history, have traveled more and more millions of miles in search of a new thing?
well.
Abraham kicked it off. Father Abraham trekking around, finding a new things. How many oceans have been crossed, indigenous people befriended and perhaps later exterminated, enslavement of many for the prosperity of others, protests by women to vote, mass exodus of black folks to the north in search of a new thing.
What?
Walls built that came tumbling down to unite 2 parts of cities. Berlin Wall came tumbling down. How many countries have been changed, their names changed, their boundaries rearranged because of doing a new thing? Political coups to depose of one corrupt dictator or another. We can actually even travel to Cuba. A new thing. The search for the new thing is not always the volition of the travelers. Not always is it that we are seeking something new. Not always is it that we are in a quest to go over that mountain range to see if there really is a pot of gold at the end of that rainbow. Sometimes it's because of war and violence, as Sam mentioned in the prayer. It's because one group has decided to perpetrate genocide on another. The most recent study for the United Nations showed the highest level in the history of humanity of refugees. 25.4 million refugees worldwide. People just moved out of their communities, moved out of their homelands, just moving, trying to find a new thing and new peace and new safety, just trying to live. 40 million internally displaced people. People within a country, within their homeland, who because of war or violence or genocide can't find shelter but are displaced in their own home. Sometimes it's those things we call natural disasters that take on an unnatural part of living for those impacted. 3.1 asylum seekers, a total of 68.5 million people just moving around trying to find a new thing. This passage of scripture is drawn from a time in which the children of Israel were suffering under the intense Babylonian rule.
Yes.
There were some who had been taken into exile. Some had been taken away into Babylon. Others remained in the homeland. But there was little or no difference because the Babylonians didn't play.
That's right.
They were the biggest, baddest, toughest group in the country, in all countries.
Yeah.
They did not care who you were. They did not care about your God. They did not care about your humanity. They came and they crushed you under their heel.
That's right.
The somebodies, the children of Israel, the somebodies, the chosen of God, had become nobodies in this region.
Yeah.
They were a group to be pitied, ridiculed, rejected, and humiliated, and they felt it. They felt it physically. Their bodies humiliated, not their own. They felt it economically, unable to make a living and to even have their resources claimed as their own. They felt it culturally, not being able to sing their songs and do their customs and traditions. They felt it religiously, not being able to worship the true and living God. They felt it.
Amen.
Traditions and customs that were essential to their identity. Babylonians, the superpower of the day. They warred and raided and subjugated and had no regard for anything or anyone other than what they wanted. Winner take all, loser come to my home.
Yes.
That was their motto. The chosen people of God, they were no exception. They had no relevance for the Babylonians, just another group to have in the cast of subjects. We know what that's like.
Yes.
In our era, in our day, it hasn't been that long. When the biggest, the baddest road brute in the neighborhood decides to take the weakest and the least among us.
Yes.
We forget, and in our era and in our time, that there are still missing schoolgirls in Nigeria taken by Boko Haram. Still missing. Some of them recovered. Still missing. Almost vaporized into the universe. The biggest, baddest bully has no regard for women or children. They raid villages, take prisoners. The Babylonians were as prolific as any of these modern day folks, minus the weaponry. No regard, no consideration.
That's right.
They were the murderers of hope, the purveyors of doom and destruction.
Yes.
They were your worst nightmare
That's right.
come to life. And it is against this backdrop of burdensome existence, the hopeless, futureless existence, that the prophet comes and stands.
That's right.
It's against that backdrop. The prophet comes and takes a stand, and you know what a prophet is always going to say. Thus saith the Lord.
Yeah.
That's the introductory statement.
That's right.
Not me talking. Thus saith the Lord. It's important for us to remember this. The prophet is one of those folks that gets your attention with that opening salvo to the oracle. What I like about this is that it kind of reminds me when in that same household, in small towns, you played outside, and sometimes, you know, as you're playing out there with the neighborhood kids and you're in the mud and dirt and dust and you're just doing all kinds of stuff, and sometimes your mama had a message. You could go out there at 7 years old and you could babble anything, but if you ended it with this statement, and mommy said so, in a voice that echoed that of James Earl Jones, everybody moved. That's how the prophet works. God said so. End of discussion. God said so. So the prophet shows up in this picture with this opening salvo. He says it 3 times in this chapter. Thus saith the Lord.
Yes.
God said so. Against this backdrop, to declare promise and possibility, to remind God's own people, God's chosen people, that God is fully capable of deliverance from the oppressive jaws of the Babylonians. To remind them of eras and times gone by when he brought them out of no way, brought them through waters and seas, brought them through, fed them when there was no food available. That God, that's the God that says, thus saith the Lord, says the prophet. It is in this construct that Isaiah's brings this message of hope in the midst of the deep despair, a message of confidence, because God is the same God that will confront the Babylonians that confronted Pharaoh's army.
Amen.
This is the same God who doesn't care that your position has been overrun by the tsunami of violence and captivity. God will surely send a prophet in the midst of the mess when God's people are at risk.
Amen.
When God's people are at risk, God will send someone to remind you that you are someone.
Amen.
Thank you, Jesus.
That's right.
He will remind you that you are someone. Thus says the Lord. Listen up, folks. There is something that is about to change.
Mm-hmm.
Something's going to change here. God is speaking to you, children of Israel.
Mm-hmm.
You little ragtag group,
Mm-hmm.
dealing with the local bullying.
Mm-hmm.
You little refugees. God's chosen,
Mm-hmm.
forgotten, you think, remembered in the mind of God.
Yes, right.
God says, according to the prophet, I'm about to do a new thing.
I'm about to do a new thing.
Do you not perceive it?
Mm-hmm.
God in this chapter talks about Redeemer, the Holy One of Israel. Thus says the Lord, your Redeemer, the Holy One of Israel. The Redeemer is the one when you are in bondage. This is how the tradition was set up. A Redeemer, if you were held bondage, if you owed something, somebody could come in and pay the price to get you free.
Amen.
That's what a Redeemer does.
That's right.
It's with a capital R.
Mm-hmm.
Because God is the Redeemer, and God always sends to God's people a Redeemer.
Amen.
God will send it to you.
Amen.
It will show up with a coupon with your name on it.
Amen.
Shows up
Yes.
in your checkout line with
Yeah.
a coupon
That's
with
right.
your name on it. God shows up. The prophet is telling, thus says the Lord now,
Mm-hmm.
I'm about to do a new thing. You do know it's interesting when you live or travel through the desert. When I go to Arizona, I'm always amazed by the desert because the desert, and just driving through it, has this sameness.
Mm-hmm.
It looks the same
Mm-hmm.
until you look closer.
Mm-hmm.
Because in the barrenness of the desert, there's life.
Mm-hmm. Yes, there is.
There's plants.
Mm-hmm.
There are animals.
Mm-hmm.
And on this one National Geographic show, it talked about rivers
Mm-hmm.
underneath
That's right.
the desert. There is
That's right.
life-giving essence
Mm-hmm.
underneath
Amen.
the desert. Don't be fooled by the dust.
Mhm.
Don't be fooled by the barrenness. Don't be fooled by the sameness of it, because underneath it all, there is sustenance. There are rivers flowing under the desert. And if you look closely, there's life in that same desert.
Amen.
There are animals who can live in that 100 and some odd degree heat. There are birds that fly around in it. God is there, and God is teaching us in this passage, wait a minute,
Mm-hmm.
do you think your desert is too big, too bad, too tough for me? Because I'm living in your desert. I'm providing life, sustenance, water in your desert.
Uh-huh.
Do you think that your condition is such that I can't deliver you from that? Do you not realize even the wild animals that surround you, I sustain even them?
Yes.
God is saying, I'm doing a new thing. Do you not perceive it? Our eyes get blinded by it. In Arizona, they would be the ebus, the dust storms that blow up, and we can't see in front of us. God is saying to God's chosen people, it's me, the same God who delivered you from that can get you out of this.
That's right. Amen.
Do you not perceive it? I'm doing a new thing. Forget about anything that you thought you knew.
Mm-hmm.
Don't worry about the history. I got the history covered, but I've got the future in view. I'm about to do a new thing. Look for it. I will break down the chariots just like I did before. I'm about to do a new thing. I will give you your freedom just like I gave you your ancestors' freedom. I'm about to redeem you. I've got your coupon ready. Your name is on it. This is a foretaste of the great and mighty emancipation of humanity, that God is sending a Redeemer with our names written in the book of life, and his name is Jesus.
Amen.
Thank you, Jesus. I'm about to do a new thing.
Yeah.
Do you not see it? Are you in such a rut that you don't realize that that light at the end of your tunnel is the very light of Jesus Christ? I'm about to do a new thing. Even in the midst of your desert, in the midst of your dust storm, in the midst of your fatigue, I'm doing something new.
Oh, mercy Lord.
I'm doing something new.
That's good.
The prophet
That's good.
just shows up in the midst of God's people, in the midst of their fatigue, in the midst of their doubt, in the midst of their thinking, surely God has forgotten about us, in the midst of their extinguished hope, in the midst of their forgetting how to even cry out for help, when their culture has been eradicated, when their religion is being mocked, and in the midst of all of that, God is saying, I got you.
That's right.
I'm doing